Let's talk about what that could mean and what we should take from the party's platforms with our front bench. Former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is here. He's the CEO of Space Canada now. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is with us. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. Less than a week to go. Tom, I was texting you earlier trying to figure out when it was in 2015 that your party released its platform, and I had a feeling that it was earlier than advance voting. That has normally been the case for most of the parties. In this case, nobody got theirs out in advance of the debate. The Liberals and the NDP, it was the second day of advance voting, and now the Conservatives after advance voting has closed. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that they didn't think it was going to have a very important effect on people's voting patterns. They had to go through this. It's like the compulsory exercises in figure skating in the Olympics. You have to do this and this and this. And so they had to come out with a costed platform. But so much of it, as Colton was just explaining, so much of it is wishful thinking. You know, on the Liberal side, well, it's all this money that's going to fall into our lap because we've got these counter tariffs. And on the Conservative side, it's, well, don't you know that what we've just put forward here is going to grow the economy exponentially, and all this money is going to be flowing in, so it won't be a problem. I also remember, bless her, Bev Oda's orange juice, and every time we talk about these big numbers, and I'm not taking anything away from the ability or the thoughtfulness of the average Canadian voter, but when you're starting to say that you're going to go from a $45 billion deficit down to $38 billion the second year, and it takes 15 minutes to explain it, the average person just says, okay, you're all full of prunes. You're all telling me I'm going to get a big tax reduction. It's going to cost nothing. The economy is going to go great. And the reason that we're all told that we have to be just careful in our choices because there's a real threat from the United States with the tariffs. So it's all a contradiction. It's a game that's being played. It's something they have to go through. And I think that on balance, I think that Poilievre did as well as he could. He didn't just seem, he actually expressed his frustration that nobody was as outraged as he was about how lousy the Liberal numbers were. But welcome to the election campaign, then explain why they're lousy and show why yours are better. But you sense that deep frustration starting to take hold in the Conservative camp, and it came out again today.
Lisa, what's your takeaway from the platform? And do you agree with what Tom's saying insofar as nobody really placed a primacy on providing those details to Canadians because their messaging, basically, one around stability, the other around change, perhaps, they thought would resonate more?
I would say that both parties try to rejig, I would say, how we're presenting a platform. So in the case of the Liberals, what they try to do is separate out expending and have part of it an operating budget and part of it a capital budget. And it really did go over the heads of a lot of Canadians. And it does sound like it's going to be a nightmare in moving the machinery of government to do something like that. On the side of the Conservatives, they are relying upon showing revenues coming as they change the regulatory system in order to bring in more business investment. I mean, they've got a couple of people who have reviewed it and said that the numbers are good. They've got, Phil Cross and they've got Tim Sargent, who are well known as being involved with either Finance Canada or with Stats Canada. So they've covered off what they need to cover off in terms of the platform. But to your question directly, does it really matter? No one's listening to this stuff about platforms. What people are trying to figure out is how they're going to vote. I think, actually, if I want to put a fine point on it, I think people are trying to figure out who's going to win. And they want to be on the winning side. We're at the point where people want to vote with the winner. And that, in the world of a politician, is absolutely terrifying because you don't know what they're talking about and you don't quite know where it's all going to go.
Brian, what do you make about the timing of the platforms and what's your takeaway from them?
Yeah, I think Lisa and Tom's points are bang on. It was obviously a strategic decision to wait until the weekend of advance polling. And look, times have changed, right? We're all used to sort of an election, or we still have in our psyche that an election is on election day, but there's people that vote throughout. You can vote at returning offices throughout the campaign, and then you have advance voting that seems to be garnishing more and more interest and participation. As we've seen, must be some type of record, I'm assuming, with 7 million Canadians having voted this past weekend. So look, it means that those 7 million people, they're not going to change they may change their minds, but they ain't going to change their votes, right? So So the idea that they waited for the platform definitely demonstrates this wasn't something that either one of the two, as we call them, traditional parties would think will garnish any more support, kind of sway any voters. And instead, I mean, I can't, I'm not in their psyche, but I'm assuming Carney and his team are like, look, we don't necessarily want people talking about the minutia of our platform. We want them talking about what we're going to do on Trump, right? We want every cycle as much as we possibly can to be about that. And I'm guessing to some extent Poilievre had the same, and his team had the same type of calculation, but maybe more so for affordability and maybe more so for sort of the track record of the Liberal government over the last 10 years and not the Carney government. So maybe the two camps basically said, those are our messages. We actually don't want anything to get in the way, including our own ideas, including our own promises and our own platform. So I'm assuming that's what the calculation is. And frankly, I think, again, alluding to Lisa and Tom's points, I'm not sure that most Canadians, especially in this election, would have been combing through the platforms to decide who to vote for anyway. I think the issues are so major. There's a handful of major issues, and they want to hear the parties and more specifically the leaders on those.
I think, you know, to be the Pollyanna, Benzie, of the group, I think I would say there are some Canadians, and I hear from them a lot, who care a lot about the specifics of what the parties put forward. I don't want to sort of diminish the people who do care. I understand the strategic imperative because even when you look at the way in which the two platforms were released, it kind of substantiates what Tom, Lisa, and Brian said, insofar as the Liberals released theirs, and the first thing people said was, this sounds like something Justin Trudeau had written, which went counter to the message that Mark Carney has been trying to deliver throughout the entirety of the campaign. The Conservatives released theirs today, and the first thing people thought is, like, what math are you relying on? And the budget isn't balanced, as you said it would be, which again takes away from the message that they want to deliver around change and around a host of other things. So I get it from a strategic perspective. I think it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, all the parties would put out their platforms on the first day of an election campaign, and we would also have 5 debates on specific subjects, you know, foreign policy, domestic policy, healthcare, whatever. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a not a bad country, Canada, and I think that it's a good sign, Vassy, that, you know, I think between a third and a quarter of Canadians have voted already in this election. That's extraordinary. So it means we're probably going to have, you know, 60+% turnout, maybe even 70% turnout. People are engaged. I don't know who they're going to vote for, but I know what the polls say, and I know what the advertising strategy suggests. And it looks to me like this thing, I don't want to say it's baked yet, but the cake is getting close to being done. And unless there's some kind of a final week surprise, I don't think it's going to be quite as dramatic a night a week from yesterday as I might have thought, or you might have thought, or any of us might have thought on New Year's Day when we were talking about what was going to happen in the next election. This is it's quite extraordinary what's transpired over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and I've never seen anything like it. But I will not be surprised if it's a Liberal majority government. Maybe it's a Liberal minority government if the Liberals start to fade in Quebec, but they're not fading here in Ontario. Lisa knows this province really well. She lives here. I live here. They're at 50%. The Liberals are in Ontario, and I can't believe that. I'm stunned that they are still so high, and the Tories are at, you know, roughly 39% or whatever, which is really good in a normal year. That's a majority government in a normal year, but this isn't a normal year.